Hey, what's up? Hello. Welcome into Fantasy Filmball, the show where we turn movies into sports and sports into something we don't talk about here. My name is Matt.
My name's Dyl, and you see the title. We've watched the new Joker movie at a fan event last night, and let's just say we don't see eye to eye here.
No. As often we don't on this channel, but that's the fun of it. We can disagree, we can go our separate ways with our opinions, and we can still talk about it. You know, we're really we're given that old like TV movie talk show thing where I didn't like it, Dylan, you really liked it, but before we get into that, let's just talk a little bit about the movie. This is Todd Phillips' new film following the first Joker, Folie, Deux, which finds Arthur Fleck institutionalized in Arkham Asylum, awaiting trial for his crimes in the first film. And while struggling with his dual identity and speaking with lawyers who advise him to go for an insanity plea, Arthur ends up meeting a woman named Harleen Quinzel, who ends up being potentially his true love. She's a super fan of his who's been obsessing over him and ended up serendipitously meeting him at Arkham Asylum. And also he finds the music that's been inside of him that he just needs to let out. A commentary on the dual identities that we all hold, the person that we perform for other people, and the real us. Which one is truly real? So, Dylan, because I'm gonna come down on this movie like a goddamn hammer, why don't you start off? Start off a little bit more positive, and then I'll come in and smack everyone's fun down to the ground.
All right, let's dive into this. And contradictory to you in the opening synopsis, it mentions from creative Todd Phillips, I go as far to say that Joker Folie Deux is a bold statement from visionary director Todd Phillips, and I think that Joaquin Phoenix adds such a new layer to his dynamic performance as Arthur Fleck. And Lady Gaga, I think, showcases her singing chops on a grand scale, even if she's not in this movie as much as a lot of us were suspecting all awards season long. And Folie is a technical marvel, at least in my book, and I feel like it has so many themes that demands to spark our conversation. In fact, that is my favorite element about this movie as a whole. But let me dive into why I came out of Folie Deux and join a little bit, because this film, it fucks, like literally. And the film, I think, truly shines when it embraces its fantastical elements. It diverges from this courtroom drama thriller that I think dominates a little, maybe too much of the narrative. But when we go inside the minds of Arthur and of Lee, we're treated to this vibrant throwback Hollywood nostalgia look with stunning production design, some of the year's most gorgeous cinematography, and mesmerizing surrealist musical numbers. And I wish that the film stayed inside this enchanting realm just a little bit longer than the gritty, the dark, the gray world that we're all too familiar with from the first installment. And speaking of the first installment, Folie Deux tackles a range of significant issues. I think that these include the judicial system, rehabilitation, mental illness, medication, and most importantly, sensationalism. I feel like these themes are on full scale, top to bottom, inside of this film. And while I think your mileage may vary of which of these themes resonates most with you, the one that I think at least stuck out to me was the exploration of love. It just struck me the most. And I think it highlights how people can often love or embrace a certain aspect of you, but not the entire version of you, and the effects this can have on someone's psyche. This narrative just allows Joaquin Phoenix to expand Arthur Fleck's traits and his fantasy of the Joker in just so many different ways, and we see him deal with the ramifications of his actions, as well as reap the benefits and the consequences from the first film, from the entire masses. This includes Lady Gaga's Lee, who plays, I would say, a pivotal role in conveying these themes. Like I said before, her screen time may not be as much, but she's in this film a little bit more than some of the reviews out there would lead you to believe. And while we never really get to see the world from her eyes, because like some of the marketing was saying, it's the Joker and Harley show, show, this is really just the Joker show featuring Harley Quinn, but her inclusion helps elevate and helps convey these themes inside Arthur Fleck's character. And I think, like I said before, this film's strongest asset is the conversation it will ignite between audiences. That's what I'm actually most excited to talk about here today, is because some people will adore this film, other people will despise this film, and I think many people will respect it while feeling a little bit of a disconnect. And I'm just so anticipating this discussion here today because I dug Todd Phillips' latest work. I enjoyed it even if I wanted to wish for a few additional things inside of the narrative, but I'm not walking out hating this film like what I think the film's kind of crafted to do to a lot of people like myself who enjoyed the first installment. And again, just to throw it over to you, Matt, what I love most about Joker maybe isn't even the film itself. It's what it wants to spark out of you in all of these discussions. And I'm very actually excited to hear you kind of shit on this movie.
Well, it's funny that you say that this movie makes people want to talk and like says so many things, because I would actually say that a large part of my issue with it is that I don't feel like this movie had anything to say, really. I found it to be pretty empty, and all these things you bring up about it, speaking about the justice system and speaking about incarceration and social services, and sure, that stuff is in the film, but I don't think it has any perspective on any of it. But anyways, I'll just say that this was a mess. It was a total mess all around. And sometimes when you say something's a mess, you mean Megalopolis. And it's a fun mess. It's a mess that has you laughing your ass off the whole time because you're like, how did this get made? This was boring. It was just boring. It didn't make me think of anything interesting. It didn't make me ponder over interesting topics. I just sat there wondering why they made this. What was the purpose of it all? And for reference, I loved the first Joker. And to clarify, I didn't love it for the weird reasons. Like, there's some people out there who are like, "Ooh, Joker is my god. I love Joker." That wasn't me. You know, I loved it for the performance, for the world building of Gotham City, the way that it interwove 70s New York City through the lens of Martin Scorsese with the world that we know from the DC comic books and movies. That was so cool to me. And for the plot, which may have just been a reworking of Taxi Driver and The King of Comedy, but it was also one of the better tributes to Paul Schrader and Martin Scorsese that I've seen out there. I loved how it dove into the troubled psyche of Arthur Fleck through the lens of superhero mythology. That was a really cool thing that it did. And what I was hoping for with Joker Folie à Deux was something bold and new. The idea of making this into a musical starring Lady Gaga as Harley Quinn was exciting and fresh, and it promised that it was going to shake things up from the first, leave the past behind, and charge forwards. But that's not the film that Todd Phillips made. If Joker was The Hangover, this is The Hangover Part 2. And the drop in quality is similar. And like with The Hangover, Todd Phillips made a film that unexpectedly became a cultural sensation much larger than anyone expected it to be. The Hangover won a Golden Globe, for Christ's sake. That was a movie that was everywhere. You could not escape it. It was every single person was referencing that movie everywhere in 2009. What should have been another comedy that just disappeared became like the talk of the world. And Joker was similar. What seemed like it was just going to be a superhero movie with sort of like a different take on Joker ended up being a cultural sensation. And his follow-up, also like The Hangover, was a sequel that shows Todd Phillips' inability to grasp why people loved the first movie and instead just retreaded the events that took place in the first one. The Hangover Part 2 is infamous for basically just being like, what if we did the exact same thing in a new location? What if instead of Vegas, it was Bangkok? And this one, while it doesn't just redo the events, it does spend the entire runtime just telling you what happened in the last movie. So yeah, it is a different movie. It's not exactly like The Hangover Part 2, where it's the exact same events, but I have never seen a sequel as stuck in the past as Joker Folie à Deux. And in my opinion, a sequel's job should be to move the story forward, to develop new ideas, take the characters to new places. But Joker Folie à Deux seems to think that all you need to do in a sequel is remind us, you liked the last movie. Remember that? Let us just sit here and tell you what happened last time. It's the first time I've seen a legacy sequel, the films that we've been seeing like Star Wars The Force Awakens or Ghostbusters Afterlife, which are so focused on like, remember that thing from the past? They're famous now. It's the first time I've seen a legacy sequel made 5 years after the original instead of 30 years, where every single character is defined by their opinions on the events of the first movie. Who needs a plot with forward momentum when you're stuck in the past? And it's just not my idea of a good sequel to have most of the runtime be people in concrete rooms talking about what Arthur did last time, rather than watching him do anything this time. He is a totally inactive protagonist, no agency, doesn't do a single thing through the film. At least until there's a certain point where he takes things into his own hands and he becomes lawyer Joker. And he does something there. But up until that point, what does he do? Nothing. There's nothing anything that happens to him, not because of him. And it feels like any time they introduce an idea that could shake things up, that they could change things, they immediately backtrack. Harley and Joker set a fire and they escape. Okay, well, actually, they caught them again and now he's in solitary confinement and she's gone. They backtrack. The lawyer tells him that Harley is lying to him, that she is secretly a psychologist and she has all this money and she's playing him for a fool. Well, he takes her to task for it. She apologizes for lying, and it's never brought up again. They never once bring up the fact that she's a psychologist. I thought it was going into like a really interesting femme fatale route. Like, I thought for a second that maybe she was manipulating him to be this icon. And she was actually some sort of evil master. Nothing like that. Nothing. Backtrack. And then there's the car bomb at the very end that sort of brings together this idea of Joker being a concept that has outgrown Arthur, promising a sort of ending that shows how his legacy has gotten out of control. And even if Joker the person dies, Joker the idea survives no matter what. But once again, they backtrack and they send him right back to where he started. Anytime this movie even sniffs having a plot, it takes us right back to square one. And yes, it looks nice. It sounds nice. There are good performances. But about halfway through, I realized that I was waiting for a reason to be there watching a sequel to Joker. And by the end, I was still waiting for that reason. It was just a deeply pointless film, in my opinion.
And I guess that's going to lead us into the positives of this movie, because that last part there is one of my positives of the film, because I love how this film kind of plays as a mega fuck you to the first film, and it flips the concept of the ideals, because there's all this talk, I mean, I'm wearing a Dune shirt right now, but of Dune Messiah and Dune the book, and how Frank Herbert had to go out and make a whole other book to tell the people who misinterpreted the original Dune, no, this guy, he's actually a bad person. And here, I feel like Todd Phillips, I feel like Joaquin Phoenix are doing that with Joker, saying, you think he's this great guy, you think he's a martyr, you think he is this type of hero, literally me? No, the dude's a loser. I'm going to show you how much he's a loser. He has every opportunity to win, to succeed, to get what he wants and what he dreams of in this movie, and every time he fails and goes exactly back to where he was, because at the end of the day, he is just a loser. And I feel like that's an element that really adds a new dynamic level to Joaquin Phoenix's performance in this film, because in the first film, you do get the sense that Arthur Fleck is kind of a guy down on his luck, but you don't really ever get the sense that he's just a complete loser. You feel like everyone's out to get him. But here, they emphasize he does something, he doesn't care, he doesn't think any better. He's just a loser and nothing can go the way he wants because he does everything wrong. And I love how they echo that theme in here. And you kind of joked about Lawyer Joker. Lawyer Joker was one of my favorite scenes of the movie. I wanted more Lawyer Joker. That was the hamminess that I felt like the first movie was kind of missing a little bit, but didn't fit into that narrative. But it fits so well in here, especially in the courtroom. And when I say I'm positive in this film, I do sound so much more positive than I think a lot of other people out there. But I still have some major issues with the film, and it's because it presents these cool ideas. It presents these cool elements, sort of along the same lines that you were talking about there. Just mine are slightly different elements than the ones that you were mentioning, and I just wish they hammered harder into those. You get these surrealist fantasy moments with the musical numbers. And there's a specific number being the Joker song, where it takes place inside the courtroom. I feel like that should have been what this movie was from start to finish. Just driving into the fantastical elements, the surrealist elements, these grand sets, eye-popping costumes, so much technical marvel of what we were all expecting this film to be when we were doing our Oscar predictions all year. And it feels like as soon as that song gets going, it ends and we're right back to where we were. Did I enjoy where we already were? Yes, but I enjoy this other space so much more. And then they tease this idea of the Joker and Harley show. It starts, it ends. And they bring up all these, I think, fantastical ideas, and they just start and end so soon. But this is supposed to be my positive section because the cast here, I think, is so positive. I've talked about Joaquin Phoenix. I think his performance in the first movie is better, but he's adding so much more to the character here. And then I think Lady Gaga, while she doesn't have much to her character, I think she's doing a lot inside of her character, even if her only real role is, hey, sing, just sing. And this is a spoiler review. I'll make sure there's a spoiler tag ahead of time. I think Lady Gaga and Joaquin Phoenix's best scene in the movie is the last one on the stairs when Joaquin Phoenix is just like, can we stop singing? I don't want to do this anymore. And I don't know. I think this film's poking fun at itself from start to end. And while maybe that can be seen as a mess and maybe that can be seen as boring, at least to me, I took it as just a bold swing that very much worked for me.
On the other hand, I feel like it's not bold enough. Those fantasy surreal moments were a symptom, I felt, of how afraid the film was of really being bold. They were half steps into boldness. The way that Joker and Harley rarely actually sing and mostly are singing like 10%, I think that's what Gaga said. She's like, oh, I was singing like 10% of what I would normally do. But like, you hire Lady Gaga and then you tell her to act like she can't sing? Like, that feels emblematic of a larger problem, which is that they are terrified of actually making this a musical. And the musical sequences are lacking creativity. They could have gone much bigger visually to mimic the films that they keep showing on TV. They show the bandwagon on TV constantly. That's Entertainment song. It's from one of my favorite movies of all time, The Bandwagon, directed by Vincente Minnelli. And Vincente Minnelli, his work is so visually playful. It's so unique. It goes into this colorful surrealism constantly. But to constantly reference that movie, that song, and then to not even remotely try to recreate the heights that were reached by the Freed unit's playful surrealism, it just feels like they were half-assing a concept. And the fact that every single visually interesting song sequence is in the trailer tells you everything that you need to know about it. Like, the only songs that they didn't put in the trailer are the ones where they didn't go surreal. They didn't have a set. Everything else is in the trailer. I can't think of one moment that was visually cool in this movie that wasn't in the trailer, which is why I was so hyped for this movie. It was promising that there was more that we didn't see. But there was nothing more that we didn't see. Everything interesting was in the trailer. But that said, on a positive note, I loved the idea, the premise of making it a musical. On a conceptual level, I think it's brilliant. You know, the theme of the film is obviously be the real you. That's what's said over and over and over. But this is skewed through the lens that everyone sees Arthur through. It's a film about parasocial relationships and the person that we build around the person we see on TV. When everyone tells Arthur to be the real him, they're telling him to be the version of him that they've created in their minds. The lawyer is telling him to be the real him because she's decided that he has a split personality and that the real him is actually this quiet guy that she's decided. Lee is telling him to be the real him because she believes that the real him is the Joker that she saw on TV. That's the real him. And it's sort of a film about performance, a film about the way that media creates a fake idea of who the real version of ourselves is. And so it feels really fitting in a film about performing a part, acting a character to fit into the perception of who people want you to be. These songs lean into those themes of performance, those themes of showmanship, the way that media is a circus. And those songs, I don't see them as the fractured mind of a mentally ill person. I think they're an expression of who he's trying to pretend to be, someone who's fitting into a role. And so the animation, the songs, it's an exploration of authenticity and performance. And that was a cool idea that I think they half-assed. But I liked the idea. And like I mentioned before, cinematography, score, definitely highlights. Lady Gaga is fantastic when they give her the room to work. It's just sad that so much of her performance is sitting silently in a courtroom watching. But anytime she's talking, she's fantastic.
I think I agree with almost everything you said. That just, I guess, poses up our, I guess, different reactions to what happened. While to you, your reactions to those things was a lot more negative, to me, it was appreciative, and I did vibe with those. But again, I haven't seen some of the films that you're referencing, so maybe if I had seen those, I would be a little bit more let down.
I think the difference between us is that while you were excited by the potential of what was being offered, I was disappointed that the potential wasn't lived up to. Because I hear a lot of what we're saying is the same, where it's like, I wish that they pushed it further. But for you, it's like, it's cool that they even tried it in the first place. But for me, it's, well, if they were going to try, they should have done it.
That is very fair, and that would lead into some of my, I guess, issues with the film is where I feel like there should have been more musical numbers, like we're both saying here, of where they present them when they're on screen. They're so fantastical, they're so beautiful, they're so gorgeous. I love the sets. But then, like you said, they're kind of all in the trailer, and even the ones that are in the trailer, some of them aren't even in the movie. I think about them dancing on the courtroom steps. That's on the trailer, that's on the poster, and it's not in the film itself. And then I think that sometimes the film is a little too focused on one of the points I made before that I did appreciate, but I think they did it a little too much, of just sticking it to people who misunderstood the first and being like, no, we're going to really hammer this point down all the way up into the final scene of the movie, which you touched on a little bit before about the theming of all of that and how the idea does not die with the individual person. And I know this last point, we're on the completely different side of the die here. I think at points they may have went a little too bold without actually going through with the concept itself.
That's fair. Okay, I just have a question for you. How the fuck did this cost $200 million? It's set entirely in concrete rooms.
Well, the thing is, apparently, Todd Phillips keeps denying it cost $200 million. He just doesn't say how much it actually cost. So my thinking is that the first film cost like 80 to 90. This one probably cost like 160. They probably doubled it, which is crazy. But he said during Cannes that he wanted to make sure everyone got pay bumps from the last movie. So it wasn't just him. It wasn't just Phoenix getting pay bumps. It's the entire crew. So if you're getting paid X amount, now you're getting paid double. That makes sense. But again, like you're saying, it doesn't still make sense of how this movie overall costs 160 plus. And I think it could go down to something that I kind of hinted at before of there's elements in the trailer that aren't in this film. That's potentially stuff they shot, they edited, they paid for, and just didn't include inside the film itself. So potentially more money just left on the table.
I thought one of the most interesting things that this film had going for it was the idea of what's going on outside of Arkham. With every scene on the news that we see, it feels like the crowd is growing, and it feels like the movement around Joker has become bigger and bigger and bigger. He's this icon that, like I said earlier, has outgrown his actions, that all of these disaffected people out there are imitating him, seeing him as a god, doing these things in his honor. And it's just such a shame that we're staying with Arthur's story, which is not a story. There's no story. His story ended in film 1. Film 2 is just watching him wait to die. But the interesting story is what is happening outside in the world. What are these people doing? How is Gotham, how is society reacting to the chaos that has been caused by Arthur Fleck and his actions? And the car bomb that takes place in the courtroom made me think of how much we missed out on seeing outside. there's so many interesting things that happened there that showed his legacy, that showed what fucked up things he did in the real world that inspired others. But we see none of it. And that makes me sad. That was so interesting.
I do agree that it would be very interesting, very compelling to see that, but I just think it's the narrative they set the tone of in the first film of we see the world through Arthur's eyes and only his eyes. We never get time without him, at least in the scene. Even the scenes focused on Gaga's Lee, Arthur is still at least involved somehow in those moments. So it's something that they would need to establish right away from the get-go of this movie is, hey, we're branching out now. And I think that's where some of us were expecting this film to go when we originally thought it was a two-hander of the Joker and Harley show, where obviously it's still just the Joker show featuring Harley. And you talk about the repercussions of his actions outside. I actually enjoy how we're seeing these repercussions in his own life, and it may not be as prevalent early on in the story, but as the story keeps going on and on, we see people who may be warming up to maybe not Arthur, but the idea of the Joker, end up facing some sort of hardship, whether that is the brutality of the cops inside Arkham, or maybe people on the outside seeing the person he thinks who loves him, of Harley, being so upset by him and the effects it has on him. I think back to the courtroom scene with Mr. Puddles, and how when Puddles is breaking down crying, saying, Arthur, you were the only one who was ever nice to me, never made fun of me, you can see how that is affecting his character and is breaking him mentally, and this idea of this fantastical version of himself isn't seeming as cool, isn't seeming as enjoyable for him as an individual, leading to his ultimate acceptance of, no, that is me, it was just me imagining a better life for myself.
So let's get to our ratings of the film. I've basically said my piece. I think this is a huge letdown in comparison to the first movie. It's not that I feel targeted, because I know that the film is like very clearly saying, if you liked the first movie, go fuck yourself. That's not why I didn't like this movie. I think I've said my thoughts enough. It's a 5 out of 10 for me.
I also really like the first movie, so I agree with you there. Just because you like the first movie doesn't mean you're going to hate this one around. And one of the reasons why I did come out of this film and join it is because I felt like this film inverted something that I feel like most sequels do, especially in this comic book genre, of just being a copy and paste of the first one. While this one may have focused on the events in the first one, it felt like it came with a new and a fresh idea of how to tackle on those events. And I think that Joker Folie is one of the boldest swings of 2024, and I really did enjoy the unpredictability and the subversion of expectations that it had. And while maybe I would have wished for some things, and there's a lot of things with this movie that I think are fair to criticize, and there's a lot of things I personally do criticize and wish it went further with, I do enjoy the elements that we end up getting, including another fantastic performance from Joaquin Phoenix that adds so much additional and new elements and traits to his character of Arthur. I enjoy the little LOL Batman lore moments that add nothing to the story, but if you know Batman, you're like, oh, that's cool, like Harvey Dent's face is burned off and blah 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 that's happening throughout. I think they could have definitely trimmed some stuff out of this movie. It did not need to be 2 hours and 20 minutes. I think this is the age-old example that I know I've brought up a few times on the show, is either add more or take something out. Either get up to like 2:30 and give us a few extra scenes, maybe with Harley, maybe dive into more of what's going on outside of the walls of Arkham, or maybe cut out a few things to streamline it to feel a little bit more engaging and more courtroomy, because most courtroom dramas, at least the very good ones, have a pace to them that keeps going. This one, I feel like at times kind of stalled in little bits, but I did enjoy those stalls because they were fantastical musical elements to me. And something I kind of touched on before, I want to touch on again. Lawyer Joker, such a cool idea. Wish we had more of it. We got one scene, and he kind of gives up by the end of that one scene. So I'm giving this one a very light 8 out of 10. I'll see it again before this video is posted. Who knows, maybe I'll go lower on the film, seeing it again, because I know what to expect. Maybe I'll go higher because I know what to expect. But I guess one interesting thing I want to add to this before we dive into the Oscar prospects is I don't know if it's because my theater had the cinema score cards outside of it, but it seemed like there was no walkouts, and people stood up and cheered, and people also stood up and booed at the end of the movie. And I thought that was very interesting.
That's very interesting. You got to do a cinema score. That's pretty cool. What did you give? Was this an A or a B for you?
It was sadly a B for me.
That's not bad. Okay, that's not bad. That's not bad. I would predict this is gonna get like a C- or a D+.
I'm gonna go C+ currently.
C+. Interesting. Okay, now we are an Oscar channel. We have to talk Oscar prospects. And sadly, I'm going to say I don't think there are any Oscar prospects. I am predicting a 0 nomination haul for this, going down from Joker 1 being the nominations leader of that year to 0 nominations. On its best day, I could see production design or cinematography happening. But right now, I'd say neither. I think the audience reception and the bad box office are going to tank the film. I think this is going to maybe have one of the biggest second weekend drops of all time. There's a world where this does not break $200 million worldwide.
That would be a huge, massive fallout if it fails to hit that $200 million mark. And I think the Oscar prospects for this could be nothing. It could be a few things. It could find its way to a similar Black Panther Wakanda Forever type package, but including Best Picture, I think that is the best possible case scenario. As I said before, its best case scenario is kind of a Black Panther Wakanda Forever package. A few texts, maybe supporting actress, maybe picture. But currently at this moment, I would have it in for cinematography, production design, sound, and Lady Gaga.
Okay, 4 nominations. That's a modest number. We'll see which one of us is right. Let us know in the comments what you thought of Joker Folie à Deux. Which one of us got it right and which one of us got it wrong? Also, what Oscar nominations do you guys think this movie's gonna get? As always, thank you so much for watching. My name is Matt.
My name's Dyl, and this has been Fantasy Filmball.